the street lights lit this town like a fire in a blaze, gotta burn it down. Can't be afraid to leave this out. We got this far, don't know how. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we gonna let it rain tonight. We gonna let it rain tonight. We gonna let it just like the sunrise. We gonna let it rain. Just like a spark that's breaking out. Can't make a stop, can't turn back now. We know that there's no room for doubt. No, we can't turn back now. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we gonna let it rain tonight. We gonna let it rain tonight. We gonna let it just like the sunrise. We gonna let it rain.
Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in. Hopefully you guys are having a great, Thursday evening. Hopefully you guys are having a great day. But if you are new, my name is Tanya or Titanium Builds, and thank you for joining me for another live. I appreciate it. I tried to show some of the comments as we were coming into the live. That way I could say hi to you guys that way. I see that we have some people in the chat. We'll let the chat kind of get full. You know, people will come in and then we'll get started. But we have a lot of stuff to discuss, a lot of reading. So if you guys, want to sit back, relax, and maybe grab some popcorn, maybe grab some water, you might be here for a minute. We might all be here for a minute. Let me get my desk situated there. But like I said, welcome in. Thanks for coming to tonight's live. Like I said, we have a lot of stuff going out of Idaho, but before we get to that, I just want to go over a couple things with you guys. Just really, really quick, very fast. I'm going to start doing fundraisers on Saturday for the next 4 weeks. We're going to do a fundraiser for each of the victims. So if you guys have a thought or a fundraiser that you have in mind for one of the victims, put it in the comments after the live. That way I can go back and I can see it. And I will check with YouTube to see if it's available, because all of the fundraising goes straight through YouTube. That way it can go straight to the foundation that we want it to go to. So I don't think that their foundations will actually be in the YouTube system. But if they are, I'll check on those first, but I don't think they will be. They usually cover like the big ones. So also we're going to do a members giveaway this weekend for our members. If you are not a member, make sure you sub or membership up. I don't know. I guess that's what you'd say, but become a member if you'd like. Our memberships are down a little bit and I'd like to get them up anyway. So if you guys would like to become a member, I put it in the chat. I meant to pin it. I'll put it back in the chat, and then I'll just pin it if you guys decide you want to. So no pressure, but I'll put it up there for you guys. We are going to go through some documents, and then we will get to our reading that we've been covering. So these documents, I don't know what's going on with the official Idaho website, but they're not like on there. So I had to find them another way. I found them. That's all that matters. So I think what happened was a bunch of people probably like overloaded the system. And because that's happened before with Idaho. I don't know if you guys have been around and seen the documents where they've done that before. Like back in, since it was before they moved out of Latah County, but sometimes it would like, say it was 6/1/2020, 23 or something, it would like, you would see the documents for like that whole month, and then all of a sudden they'd be gone. Like after you refreshed, like where'd those documents go? So we do have the documents. I went through them. I highlighted some stuff. The judge, I mean, they have some good stuff in them. So we'll go through it because I can tell you what they say at the end. But I do feel like the judge makes a lot of fair points. And I'd like to see how other people are kind of, taking this and taking the news, because there are some really good points and some really good like pieces in these documents. So I'm going to get my glasses ready. Should have done this before the live. Oh my gosh. I need some of that stuff that you spray on your glasses. I've never used that stuff before. Does it have alcohol in it, I wonder? I can't use alcohol. Okay. But I'll have to look into that. Okay, so let's get to it. I'm going to blow this up a little bit. That way you guys can read along if you'd like to. This is going to be from the actual judge from the court. So this is the first one, redacted order on defendant's order of proof for the alternate perpetrator theory. So remember last week or the week before when we, on the 18th, wasn't it? When they were in court, they had part of their hearing was sealed, right? And it was for the alternate perpetrator. So what happened was everybody left out of the courtroom, and they sat down, or, they all sat down or whatever, and Anne put on her evidence of alternate perpetrators. And you're going to hear how many people she said did this. Now, a lot of these are redacted, but you can read around the redaction, and you can kind of get, if you know the case, you can kind of get a feel of where she was going with it. In my opinion, you can. So it says introduction here. And I'm going to skip over some of these things where it's just like a bunch of the, when they're just going over like different court proceedings. I feel like it just gets like it just makes it a little harder to understand. So I'm going to make it easier, I feel like. But it says the state previously moved in Lemmy, seeking to preclude defendant from offering or arguing alternative perpetrator evidence without first satisfying the applicable evidentiary standards. In accordance with the law's subsequent order on the motion, defendant filed his offers of proof and evidence in support, identifying 4 individuals as potential alternate perpetrators. The state objects to the presentation of this evidence at trial, arguing it fails to satisfy the standard under State versus Meister. Defendant conceded at oral argument that at this point his proffer is not sufficient to pursue as an alternate perpetrator theory at the outset of trial, but request latitude and cross-examination. Let me read this again, because this is what I was like, what? Okay, so they don't have, they're pretty much saying they don't have the evidence right now. But it says his proffer is not sufficient to pursue an alternate perpetrator theory at the outset of trial, but request latitude and cross-examination of the state's witnesses to try to establish additional evidence to satisfy the Meister standard. So don't have it right now for you, right? But if we get to trial and I start cross-examining these witnesses, then maybe this evidence will be in there that I think that I should have right now, but I don't have it right now. But it might come up in court. That's what she's saying. And in my lawyer mind, I'm not a lawyer, I have a law degree, but the court concludes that at this time, defendant's alternate perpetrator proffer is inadmissible under Meister as it is irrelevant and or excluded by IRE 403. And you ask yourself, maybe, what is IRE 403? It is Idaho Rules of Evidence, Rule 403, excluding relevant evidence for prejudice, confusion, waste of time, or other reasons. The court may exclude relevant evidence if its probative value is substantially outweighed by a danger of one or more of the following: unfair prejudice, confusing the issues, misleading the jury, undue delay, wasting time, or needlessly presenting cumulative evidence. So that's what that means. But however, this does not foreclose defendant from cross-examining law enforcement regarding the reasonableness of its investigation and its follow-up on plausible leads. So they can, cross-examine the investigators. So, which, that's in any trial. So it says here, the standard, the trial courts have broad discretion in the admission of evidence at trial. A trial court acts within the bounds of its discretion when it, 1, correctly perceived the issue as one of its discretion, 2, acted within the outer boundaries of its discretion, 3, acted consistently with the legal standards applicable to the specific choice available to it, and 4, reached its decision by the exercise of reason. And then the analysis, this seminal Idaho case on the admissibility of alternate perpetrator evidence is Meister Supra. Prior to Meister, a defendant wishing to present such evidence at trial had to first present proof of connection with the crime, such a train of facts or circumstances as tend clearly to point out someone besides the accused as the guilty party. Remote acts, disconnected and outside of the crime itself cannot be separately proved for such a purpose. Meister clarified that the Idaho rules of evidence, rather than the more onerous Larson standard, controlled alternate perpetrator evidence admissibility. So under these rules, evidence is relevant if it as I cannot read tonight. What are we going to do? Let's try that again. Under these rules, evidence is relevant if it has any tendency to make the existence of any fact that is of consequence to the determination of the action more probable or less probable than it would without the evidence. Idaho Rule of Evidence 403 governs the exclusion of relevant evidence and permits a court to exclude evidence if its probative value is substantially outweighed by a danger of unfair prejudice, confusing the issues, misleading the jury, undue delay, wasting time, or needlessly presenting cumulative evidence. Didn't know they were going to put that in there. I read this earlier, didn't realize it was in there. Meister further offered the following guidance on applying these rules and determining whether proffered alternative perpetrator evidence is relevant and admissible. If the defendant proffers evidence which merely tends to mislead the jury that another person committed the crime, or the evidence is not relevant because it does not tend to make the defendant's involvement more probable or less probable, then it is within the trial's court discretion to find the evidence inadmissible. Mere interferences that another person could have committed the crime will most likely not be relevant, and if relevant, will still be subject to the limitation provisions of IRE 403. A defendant has no right to present irrelevant evidence, and even if evidence is relevant, it may be excluded in certain cases. The Idaho rules of evidence effectively safeguard against the admissions of conjectural interferences without the lower courts needing to apply the Larson direct connection doctrine. So I was about to say, I knew I had some stuff highlighted. So here the evidence defendant has offered purporting to establish the 4 individuals as alternate perpetrators objectively fails to meet the Meister standard. Namely, the evidence is entirely irrelevant. This is the judge. Nothing links these individuals to the homicides or otherwise gives rise to a reasonable inference that they committed the crime. Indeed, it would take nothing short of rank speculation by the jury to make such a finding. Well, there's a lot of people on the interwebs. 3 of the individuals, so this is what I was like, hold on a second. So 3 of the individuals were socially connected to one or more of the victims, interacted with one or more of the victims at social events in the hours prior to the homicide. Now, I know we're going to figure out who that is, but I highlighted it. So it says 3 of the individuals were each socially connected to one or more of the victims, interacted with one or more of the victims at social events in the hours prior to the homicide. Could it be the Sigma Chi boys and maybe Xana? Like that would be the connected person to the, victims. You think she's trying to go with that? You think she's gotten on YouTube and been like, what are they saying on YouTube? Who are they blaming on YouTube, right? I mean, because who's Brian going to give her as an alternate perpetrator? Nobody. He can't give her anybody. He doesn't know anybody to give her. He's been in jail, right? So I don't know. And then it's all redacted. But this says a lot without saying a lot. And then it's redacted. And then it says, and then it just picks up. So whatever was up here was a name, I think, because it says blah, 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 like redacted. It says lived within walking distance of the crime scene and were familiar with the layout of the victim's home with prior social events. While perhaps this evidence could suggest an opportunity to commit the crime, which no doubt is an opportunity shared by dozens of others in the victim's social circles, there is no compelling evidence that any of them had a motive to kill the victims, much less physically harm them or means to do so. Or I was thinking one of the boyfriends. So let me know what you guys were thinking, maybe. Further, there is no evidence connecting them to the crime scene. They have each cooperated with law enforcement, providing DNA samples, fingerprints, and allowing searches as requested. Notably, lab testing has excluded their DNA from samples taken from the crime scene and victims. The 4th individual did not know the victims, but had a passing connection. And remember this, because I remember this. I don't know if they ended up, I don't think they named the person, but they did, like the officers talked to them, and it was when Kaylee had a stalker. So this is when this happened. So the 4th individual did not know the victims, but had a passing connection to one of them while noticing her shopping at a store approximately 5 weeks prior to the homicides. I think this is the same person anyway. He followed her briefly out the exit of the store while considering approaching her to talk. He turned away before ever speaking to her. The event was captured on surveillance camera. This individual subsequently cooperated with law enforcement, providing his cell phone or his phone number and a DNA sample. As with the other alleged alternate perpetrators, lab reports excluded his DNA from the samples taken from the crime scene and the victims, and there's no evidence connecting him to the crime scene. Redacted. It says the fact that these individuals lived within walking distance to the crime scene is not probative evidence given that the perpetrator drove a vehicle to the crime scene. Further, none of these individuals drove a vehicle matching the description of the suspected killers. Collectively, defendants' proffer with regard to these 4 individuals fails to give rise to even an inference that they committed the crimes or otherwise make it more or less likely that the defendant was the perpetrator. Therefore, it is irrelevant under IRE 401. Defendant has provided no probative, admissible, significant evidence of motive, ill feelings, means, presence at the scene, or any other connection to the crime that could possibly move the ball to the extent it supports an alternate perpetrator theory. At best, defendant's offer of proof can give rise to only wild speculation that is possible any one of these four individuals could have committed the crimes, which is inadequate under Meister. Again, mere interference with that another person could have committed the crime will most likely not be relevant. In other words, it is not sufficient for a defendant to merely offer up unsupported speculation that another person may have committed the crime, which all defendant has done here. Even if there was a shred of probative value in the proffered evidence beyond wild speculation, it is excluded by IRE 403. As the 10th Circuit noted regarding alternate perpetrator evidence, it is not sufficient for a defendant merely to offer up unsupported speculation that another person may have done the crime. Such speculative blaming intensifies the grave risk of jury confusion, and it invites the jury to render its findings based on emotion or prejudice. Oh yeah, and he does touch on the Dateline episode too, so keep your ears out for that. So likewise, here presentation of the proffered alternate perpetrator evidence would pose a great threat of confusing the issue because it would force the state to defend against a nebulous allegation that perhaps these individuals were involved. This foray would lead the jury astray, turning its focus away from whether defendant, the only person whose actions are on trial, committed the charged crimes. It also presents a threat of unfair prejudice, as it would invite the jury to blame unrepresented persons for a heinous crime when there is not a scintilla of competent evidence connecting them to the crime. Man, I like to see Ann Taylor's face when she was reading this. Hopefully she has a drink with her. Finally, it would do nothing more than waste the precious time of the jury and the court in what is already a scheduled 3-month trial. Nonetheless, the court's ruling does not preclude defendant from confronting and cross-examining the state's law enforcement witnesses regarding the thoroughness of their investigation, particularly in following up and ruling out leads generally. Trying to see where we need to read. Some of this stuff's just like redundant, I feel like. But the court will apply these same perimeters at trial regarding defendant's cross-examination of law enforcement. He may inquire as to the reasonableness of the investigation, including investigating and ruling out other leads. He is not, however, permitted to question law enforcement about the investigation of any specific individual as a potential alternate perpetrator without first raising the matter with the court outside the jury's presence. So don't go over there behind my back and be doing this. I'm glad you put that in there because they probably would have. Order based on the foregoing, defendant's offer for an alternate perpetrator is denied. Sorry, Koberger. Sorry, Proberger. If there was another perpetrator, right, this would have been the time to give up all that evidence y'all been talking about, the tunnels, the Sigma Chi brothers. I don't know what y'all been talking about because I tune that out. I don't watch the bull crap. But what are we going to do now? What are we going to do? We can't blame it on the boyfriends anymore. Can't blame it on the Sigma Chi boys anymore. But I mean, they still will. People still will. But I'm just saying, just very, very crazy. So let's go over this one. This one is a little longer. I might just kind of skip through it though a little bit, just give you guys the good parts. And that trial day did move. I didn't move by much, but she got her a little bit of a continuance, and I'll show you that too. Sorry, got a piece of hair on my desk. So before the court is defendant's motion to continue the trial in this matter. The basis for this motion is threefold. First, he asserts that the volume of discovery continues to pose a challenge to his counsel's ability to timely and meaningfully review it all. Second, he asserts that there is penalty phase investigation and preparation that still needs to be done. Third, he asserts that recent and forthcoming publicity on the case is highly prejudicial. That's the Dateline. Maintaining the current trial setting under these circumstances, he argues, will render any conviction and sentence unconstitutional. The state responds, that defendant's motion is untimely, and he has failed to show either good cause for continuing the trial or prejudice that would result from maintaining the current trial setting. Oral argument on the motion was held June 18th, 2025, after which the court took the matter under advisement. The court finds a continuance is not warranted, as defendant has not made a showing that there is good cause to continue the trial or that his substantial rights will be prejudiced by proceeding to trial as scheduled. We just read that, so I know there was some stuff in here that I didn't want to read to you, so I'm going to just kind of go through it. That way I don't go through the whole thing, but because it kind of just told you in the beginning. But it says, under Idaho law, a criminal defendant seeking a continuance of trial must demonstrate that his or her substantial rights will be prejudiced absent a continuance. Oh, thank you, Mag Mama. Oh, thank you. It says, thank you, Tanya. I love your channel and everyone in it, or everyone on it. Aren't they the best? I do. You guys are the best in here. I do have the best people. I know everyone says that, but you guys really are. I mean, like, I don't ever have to like be like, don't do that, don't do this. Y'all are being bad. Y'all are usually pretty good. Except for that Squeaky. Where is he? Where is Squeaky, by the way? Is he in here? Okay. Okay, so under Idaho law, I already read this part. So then it says, trial judges necessarily require a great deal of latitude in scheduling trials. The burden of assembling the witnesses, lawyers, and jurors at the place and time for the trial counsels against continuances except for compelling reasons. There are no mechanical tests for deciding when a denial of a continuance is so arbitrary as to violate due process. The answer must be found in the circumstances present in every case, particularly in the reasons presented to the trial judge at the time the request is denied. Where a continuance is sought based on the late disclosure or discovery of evidence, the alleged tardiness of the discovery must be shown to prejudice the defendant's case preparation that a fair trial will be denied. The bare claim that additional investigation could have been conducted is not sufficient to demonstrate unfair prejudice so as to support a motion for a continuance. So she must have said something like that. Additionally, where a continuance is sought for the potential receipt of evidence from further investigation, the motion is properly denied if based on speculation. Defendant argues that the continuance is necessary for him to sufficiently review relevant discovery, conduct a full and complete investigation of mitigation evidence, particularly claimed newly revealed evidence that allegedly raises red flags, and remedy the prejudice caused by recent and upcoming inflammatory publicity and the alleged leak on information to the media. Moving forward with trial, he warns will violate his rights under the United States and Idaho constitutions to due process, to be free from cruel and unusual punishment, to a fair trial, to effective assistance of counsel, to present a defense and confront witnesses, and to a fair and reliable sentencing determination. Absent from defendant's materials, however, is any good cause for the continuance or legitimate showing of prejudice should the trial proceed as scheduled. Hey, Brandy. Thank you. How are you doing? And thank you for the compliment on X. I appreciate that. I was like, I will go take a picture with my Nancy Grace. People in my Nancy Grace. So then it says, defendant has not demonstrated a continuance is warranted to review discovery. Yeah, he doesn't. Do we read this part? Yeah. Okay. So defendant first contends that the vast amount of discovery in this case renders it impossible for the defense team to review the necessary and relevant discovery in a manner that allows for it to be comprehensively integrated into his defense. He further argues without any support or explanation that there are a myriad of issues that continue to arise from the state failing to comply with discovery and expert disclosure deadlines. A continuance, he argues, is necessary for counsel to mount an effective defense. What's number 3? I don't see. Defendant continues to complain of the state's discovery violation, but to be clear, this court has found no such violations by the state. Okay, so the defense is saying that, the state is like doing all this stuff with the, discovery and all that. And it's saying right here, defendant continues to complain of the state's discovery violations, but to be clear, this court has found no such violations by the state. So the state is not making violations that people keep talking about. They're not making these violations. The defense is making the shit up. So stop doing that, Anne. You're not supposed to do that. And that's what she's been doing. So if anyone says otherwise, no, she's been doing that. It says it right here too. What are you doing? She hasn't done this all day. I looked at her all day to see if she was going to do this with her ears because I was like, is it something? There's something in here, I think. Maybe because she's laying down so low. I don't know. Yeah, get on your chair, honey. Sorry. The court, however, rejected the same argument 2 months ago when the defendant sought to strike the death penalty and impose discovery obligations upon the state. In its order, the court observed the utter lack of any proof supporting defendant's accusation of discovery violations by the state. More importantly, the court found defendants' complaints of being unable to meaningfully review discovery entirely unconvincing, pointing out that counsel struggled to articulate in any meaningful way what evidence, let alone relevant evidence, counsel had been unable to review over the past 2+ years and why efforts to facilitate discovery review were not made long ago through this court and or the resource judge. Yeah. That's true. Defendant's second round of this argument fares no better. He again fails to identify any relevant discovery that his counsel has yet to review. He also fails to identify any steps his counsel has taken, particularly since the court's prior order to aid in processing the yet unreviewed discovery. Moreover, he does not explain why he waited to seek a continuance until after discovery closed, expert disclosure deadlines passed, and the pretrial conference occurred. Yeah. Wonder why. If the defense counsel was truly struggling with discovery review, this motion should have been made when the claimed problem became apparent and certainly should have been brought prior to the expiration of discovery, all expert deadlines, and the final pretrial conference. Instead, defense counsel has robustly litigated this case, retaining approximately 24 experts and a full mitigation team, engaging in extensive motion practice and disclosing witness and exhibit list with nary a whisper that a continuance would be sought. These actions belly his counsel's ongoing and ultimately empty discovery complaints. Without more, the court can only conclude that defense counsel is using the volume of discovery measured in terabytes as a tactic to delay the proceeding at the 11th hour simply for the sake of delay rather than a legitimate threat of prejudice to defendant's substantial rights. And maybe Koberger told her that she was going to find this. Maybe, I don't know what the evidence would have been. I don't know. But maybe he kept telling her, you're going to find it, you're going to find it, you're going to find it. You know what I mean? And so she didn't say she needed more time. I don't know. And then she didn't find it. I don't know why she wouldn't have said something before now. So, but perhaps even more problematic and more telling is the utter failure of defense counsel now or at any time to specify not only what needs to be reviewed, but importantly, when that review would be complete and defendant ready for trial. Instead, defendant seeks an abounded continuance with no apparent plan to complete the review of unspecified evidence that counsel claims it has yet to review. This is not sufficient to warrant a continuance. So, let's see. Defendant has not established a continuance as necessary to conduct a more thorough life history investigation and identify necessary experts. So it says, let me actually do this really quick. I always forget to put the chat up here. Okay. I wonder if she knows. Hey, Reba. Wonder if she probably does know that he's guilty. I would think she would. Defendant next argues he needs additional time to investigate and prepare mitigation evidence, which he contends is necessary to uphold his constitutional rights, particularly those under the 8th and 6th Amendments. Specifically, the defense team claims that to be effective, counsel must conduct an exhaustive and comprehensive dive into defendant's life history for additional mitigation evidence, analyze the information into a cohesive narrative for the jury, and identify any additional behavioral, cultural, scientific, and/or mental health experts that may be necessary to develop the mitigation presentation. Despite having hired a mitigation team 2 years ago, defense counsel contends that recently discovered blah, 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 have raised red flags that defendant may have redacted. According to defendant's primary mitigation investigator attorney, her team of 4 have been diligent in their investigation into defendant's life history, but there have been redacted. She believes that with time, she will be able to overcome these barriers by redacted. So is it something that he's like Brian's not letting her get access to? Okay. Defendant has not demonstrated a continuance to accommodate further investigation is constitutionally required. The 8th Amendment requires that a capital defendant be allowed to present all relevant evidence and mitigation. In addition, a capital defendant has a 6th Amendment right to a fair trial and effective assistance of counsel in both the guilt and penalty phase in a capital case. As a defendant points out, defense counsel is constitutionally required to conduct a thorough investigation in preparation for the penalty phase of a capital case. Presentation of some mitigating evidence, even if strong, is insufficient, and other mitigating evidence is available upon reasonable investigation. The assertion that counsel needs the continuance to conduct an exhaustive and comprehensive dive into defendant's life history for additional mitigation evidence overstates the extent of his counsel's constitutional obligations. Counsel's investigation into mitigation evidence must be reasonable. The Supreme Court and the United States Supreme Court hold that defense counsel is not required to investigate a defendant's entire life in order to present constitutionally sufficient mitigation evidence. And you're going to see what they've listed that they've dug into a lot in his background. We emphasize that Strickland does not require counsel to investigate every conceivable line of mitigating evidence, no matter how unlikely the effort would be to assist the defendant at sentencing. Okay, so while defendant knows that the ABA guidelines for mitigation function of defense team in death penalty cases urge counsel in death penalty cases to conduct an ongoing, exhaustive, and independent investigation of every aspect of the client's character, history, records, and any circumstances of the offense to meet their constitutional obligation, courts look not to what is prudent or appropriate, but only what is constitutionally compelled. So, this is what so the investigation into the defendant's experts have undertaken over the past 2+ years thus far exceed Roe. Okay, so this is what they've gotten. Defendant's K through PhD education records, including coursework, interviews, and correspondence. Why you need his coursework from when he was in K through 12? Or, really, any of his coursework, really. Why? You don't need that. Get his grades, and that's all. I wonder how much that, I wonder how many documents, how many pieces of paper that is. I would be so mad if I was the teacher that I had to print off my whole dang course load for somebody back from 1990, whatever, or 2000 and some, So defendant's mental health and medical records, including redacted records related to a childhood car accident. I keep forgetting about that. I need to I'll write that down. Because that should be like public record, unless they like sealed that up too. I mean, but maybe they forgot. Because I want to know about that childhood car accident. I can't wait. I can't wait to hear that during court. Make sure that we all need to make sure they bring that up, make sure, because they've been talking about it. Defendant's employment records, mental health education, and employment records of defendant's sisters. Why? Why? Why would you need that? Why would you even need that? From the Are you comparing? Well, this kid had this and this kid had the same thing. Well, I don't know. I don't know what you need for that. I would be. Is that maybe why they got fired? Because people was calling asking for records? Maybe. Mental health records of defendant's parents. Okay, I could see that. Father's military records and social security records. I guess to prove what kind of house he grew up in. Court records from multiple generations of Koberger family, parental side. Okay, VA records and death certificates from maternal and paternal uncles. Uncles? When you just go back to the grandparents, the parents, the grandparents? She's doing too much. You know what I mean? It's just this is like stuff that you would do if you had so much extra time that it's ungodly. Like, right? VA records. Okay, we already read that. So multiple interviews with defendant and each immediate family member. I can understand that. So and each. Okay, not with each. Interviews of 2 of defendant's 4th grade teachers, former boxing coach. Well, you're on your way on a plane now. And psychologist to evaluate defendant in 2005. So he would have been 11. Okay. Interviews with multiple members of defendant's extended family on maternal and paternal side. Interviews with defendant's professor and advisor at DeSales University. Interviews of defendant's former coworker. Why say interviews? Why'd you have to have more than one? Like, with his former coworker. Interviews of at least one family friend. And letters and jail calls between defendant and his family. So you guys only could find one family friend? I mean, I could see that. They look like an introverted family. I mean, like. It is evident from the reports of defendant's mitigation experts, Dr. Orr, Dr. Ryan, Dr. Brams, that they have a developed and expansive understanding of defendant's family, social development history, family. I'm hearing fireworks. I swear I just heard fire. I heard another one. I guess it's the end of June. So, I mean, yeah. Dogs can't hear nothing. Cats over here, too. I could hear that. I was like, what the heck? Hopefully those are fireworks. The dogs are back behind me, but yeah. I was about to say, I know, I was like, look at my watch. I'm like, 4th of July's coming. Yeah, tell me right. Someone's having a party already. We didn't get the invite. Okay, so where were we at? It says educational history and mental health and medical history. From this evidence, these experts have rendered several current diagnoses and identified other diagnoses for which defendant met criteria at some point in his life. Met criteria? Does that mean if it's a scale of 1 to 10 and like anything over a 5 is like, to be like troublesome, he scored a 3.5? Is that what we're talking about? Like met criteria. What do you mean? I don't understand that. I mean, I do, but I don't. They be lying. They're just trying to. They're trying to make this boy, this man, or whatever he is, have a mental health illness, and he just doesn't. He just doesn't. You know, nothing to the point that you can say, "Oh, let's put him in a mental health hospital and not put him on death row." Like, I'm sorry, but a sprinkle of autism is not going to help you in this one. Despite such an extensive investigation, especially when I know there's a lot of people that they're not high functioning autistic. They don't have high functioning autism. They're they need help, but they're still able to live a life. They just need a lot more structure. So, despite an extensive investigation, defendant claims additional investigation is warranted to identify redacted. So 1 and 2 redacted. It says, however, defendant has not established that such investigation is constitutionally compelled, particularly given the extensive work already completed. Rather, the claim is based on unqualified speculation and then it is redacted. Why do we have to have that redacted? Defendant has not offered any declaration of any of his disclosed mitigation experts opining the same, nor has he pointed to anything in their expert reports that would support something speculation, redacted speculation. As noted, a continuance of trial is not warranted to chase down mere speculation that potential evidence exists. It says further, defendant has not set forth a plan for continued investigation, how much time it will take, and what his team expects the investigation will reveal, why it is necessary to uphold his constitutional rights, and why these matters are only now being raised by the court. Additionally, assuming guilt is found, the penalty phase of the case will not begin until late October or early November. Thus, there remains significant time for Ann Taylor, I guess, and her team to continue their investigation. Oh, no, that's redacted. That's the investigator they have. And to supplement expert disclosure. So, what was I going to say about that? Oh, so will not begin until late October, early November. I thought the case, so are we not thinking that the trial is going to go on that long? Because the trial, I guess they were putting that in with penalty phase for November the 9th, but I thought that that was just for trial, and then sentencing and everything, penalty was after, but it sounds like he's thinking they might be done early. Speculation that defendant, I'm not going to read through all that because that's just crazy. Oh yeah, it says which are currently, these are his own disease, ASD, OCD, and ADHD. Welcome to my life. Oh, they're consistent with childhood trauma. Mine aren't. There is evidence of poverty. Just because your family, no, don't you dare. Okay, no, no, we're not going to go there. We're not going to do that. Just because, just because you have to file bankruptcy a couple times. This was I believe one of them was before Brian was even born. Poverty. And the other one, I think is when they live in the same house they live in now. Okay. All right. I don't think it was poverty, but okay. I mean, what are you guys doing? I mean, this is something new, that they just put in. This wasn't in there before. And I thought the ASD, OCD, and ADHD was consistent with the car accident or something he was in. I guess it's childhood trauma. It says notably missing from something declaration is any indication as to how she intends to confirm her suspicions or how long she expects it to take, be that months, years, or even decades. Defendant has been subjected to multiple lengthy interviews by several different experts over the past 2 years. Based on the expert reports reviewed by this court, defendant's family is redacted, and it says defendant's family has likewise been extensively interviewed, and there has been no report that redacted. None of defendants, maybe family members, have raised the alarm that redacted despite the same information. I want to say defendant relies upon, but I don't know. Okay, I think you just make it up words. I thought that meant something. It's just saying there's no like basis for it. I'm trying to see if there's anything we can read right here. Not really. Again, not one of the defendants, something experts who have the same information has submitted a declaration stating that they may change their diagnosis based on further investigation. Rather, it is based on something speculation that further investigation might change something. Oh, dang nabbit. I do want to read the Dateline thing. Right here. Okay. So, you know how everyone's been going around saying like it was the prosecution, the judge was talking to the prosecution more when he said that there was a leak and that it was, and everyone was saying it was like law enforcement, blah 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 blah, that stuff. So we're gonna go over this because I thought it was pretty interesting, but I'm gonna let my cat out first because he's making his way over to that door. Just gotta give him a second. He's a little old. Okay, hold on one second. Let me just let him out real quick. Hey, Nash Native. Okay. Okay, so him being mental health. I wonder what Brian's gonna think of all this. So it says defendant next seeks a continuance due to recent inflammatory pretrial publicity. On May 9th, 2025, approximately 3 months before the trial is set to begin, Dateline NBC aired a 2-hour episode about the case. The episode included details and materials about the case, which, if were true, are not publicly available and which promote a narrative of guilt. Defendant also advises that on July 9th, 2025, Amazon Prime Video is planning to release a 4-part docuseries about the homicides, and on July 14th, crime author James Patterson is set to release a book he wrote about the same. Also, we're going to get Discord done, but I'm also going to have Kick just in case we can stream all this stuff, because aside from all of that, 48 hours is going to do the trial in real time. Like, so I think it's going to be like, I don't know how many episodes. I didn't get to read all of it, but it's going to debut on July 26th. So like stuff like 48 hours, I can't do over here. So we'll have to go to another platform to stream that. So no, don't worry. I got this all under control. And I'll let you guys know exactly where to go. Way before it's time. So defendant contends that this media coverage so close to trial threatens his right to a fair trial by an impartial jury, which can only be by continuance. In addition, defendant argues that a continuance is necessary to investigate the source of the leaks to the media and impose accountability. The court does not agree that either argument compels a continuance. Where do I want to read it now? I think it's going to go, but I wanted to go down here a little bit. Okay. The court found that there was no doubt that this deluge of publicity reached at least some of the jury, given that when the jury was questioned for the only time 2 jurors admitted in open court to hearing the highly inflammatory charge that a prison inmate claimed. Oh, sorry, I didn't want to read that part. I thought that was what we wanted to read. Sorry. This is all about like a different case. So like he's like citing another case. I think it was right here. Okay. So, yeah, it is. Here, there is no assurance that the pretrial publicity will fade with time. The murders occurred over 2.5 years ago. The circumstances of the murders were proactive, provocated. 4 college students in a small Idaho town were brutally stabbed to death by an unknown perpetrator. It was an immediate media sensation and garnered widespread attention, that not only continues to persist, but continues to grow. 18 months ago, defendant moved for a change of venue from Latah County due in part to the extensive inflammatory pretrial publicity and allegations made about Mr. Kohlberger to the public by media that will be inadmissible at trial. He argued that Latah County was not large enough to avoid the bias caused by the pervasive prejudicial publicity. Say that 3 times fast. Defendant's motion was granted, and as a result, the trial date was continued by approximately 10 weeks. So those additional 10 weeks have not resulted in fading media attention. It has only given the media more time and opportunity to provide coverage to the public audience, which is clamoring for answers. The longer the public is made to sit and wait for the facts to come out at trial, the more time there is for inflammatory speculative stories, movies, and books to circulate, and more time for prior ones to be rebroadcast, purchased, viewed, and consumed by the public. And I can't agree more. I can't agree more. I can't agree more. Proceeding the trial as scheduled will likely avoid negative consequences from future publicity. Thus, the court finds a continuance is not warranted based on the media coverage. Rather, careful and patient voir dire is prescribed. Sorry. Okay, right here. With regard to the Dateline episode, defendant points out that Dateline represented that the material came from sources close to the investigation. He notes that Patterson's upcoming book on the crime promises claims to be the most comprehensive narrative of the investigation and evidence to date and is based on over 300 interviews, several individuals, including the victims' families and local law enforcement. He also notes that the Amazon Prime docuseries promises to be told in captivating, tense, and emotionally wrenching detail by only those involved in and affected by the crime. He argues that if any of the leaks came from witnesses that the state intends to call or from others involved in the investigation, the information is Brady material because it would serve to impeach the leaker's credibility and may be exculpatory in nature. He adds that if the investigation reveals that the other state agents had information about the leaks but failed to disclose it, the omission would constitute a Brady violation. As noted, a continuance is not warranted where the information sought thereby is mere speculation. So, it says such assumptions are not grounds for continuance, particularly given that there is no guarantee if and when they will be confirmed or debunked. This trial cannot be held hostage indefinitely to the outcome of the investigation, particularly given the very significant chance the leakers may never be discovered. And didn't I say that? I said they ain't gonna find out who did this. So, order denied. Then we have, so then we have the scheduling order. And the court scheduling order is, they are going to have sealed proceedings with the court and counsel. It's going to take place on July 28th through August 1st, and we'll go through those. Jury voir dire will commence on August 4th rather than July 30th and continue until a jury is seated. It is estimated that the trial itself, beginning with opening statements, will commence on August 18th, 2025 and continue until completed. So he did give her an extra week. We were supposed to go trial on August 11th. Now we're going August 18th. So Everything is denied, but he still is giving her a week. So he's giving her a week for something. I don't even know what the hell's a week gonna do, really? Like, you know? I'm like, oh, I don't really know. Maybe more time for a jury, yeah. Could be. Yeah. So, because they are gonna start on August 4th instead of August 30th. So yeah, maybe. They're still going on as scheduled. And then this is just the thing that comes up like when you go under the case schedule. So it looks like we got the order here. Trying to see. Okay, we did all these. Okay. Then they have a hearing on 7/28, but it's sealed. And then 8/4, that's going to be the voir dire, which will be, we won't see that. We'll know after the jury is seated. And then after the jury is seated, apparently they just go home afterwards because it says jury trial don't start till because what if they went in at 8/4 and they got a jury? Like, I don't think that's going to happen. But what if they did? Would they still wait till the 18th to start the trial? Because usually after you seat the jury, you go straight to kind of like opening statements. Like you go right into kind of like starting the trial, unless it's like later in the afternoon, they may like do something, But yeah. You might want to read these new documents, Vincent, because yeah, they are saying he couldn't even. He tried to say 4 other people did it, and the judge is like, no, they didn't. No, they did not. Okay, so we'll start to read. I wanted to go over tonight, but we had documents, so we went over that. I wanted to go over the new released body cam footage of Brett Payne pulling over the DoorDash driver. This was prior to the homicides. I don't think it's really relevant, but I do feel like people are going to run with it and go crazy with it. So I'm going to show it to you guys. We'll probably do that tomorrow, and I'm going to read over the actual documents from Moscow that say exactly what she said, what happened in the traffic, stop, and all of that. So we won't have to guess with what a video is saying. And then, yeah, that's what I have for you for tomorrow. And then I have some other. What was the other thing? Oh, I'm still deep diving into William because his dates aren't mathing, man. But I got to go back to the first. I want to go back to his first lives or first videos. I don't know. Oh, he's up here in the chat. Not my Vincent, a different Vincent. Wouldn't that be funny if that was Vincent? It's like they don't even want to have the conversation that, like, if you read the documents, like, I believe in innocent until proven guilty, but when you read the documents, you can kind of read what's going on. Oh, before we read the book, let's go over to the Gonzalez family page, see what they have to say. Oh, they didn't put anything. I'm surprised. Do they know there's new documents? Like, I don't see anybody like even the last comment. Like, let me see, newest. Oh yeah, there is like 2 minutes ago. So they just, okay, so people are over there. Okay. Let me put this up, put this back. No, in the chat. He's right here, guys. What'd she read, Ladybug? She had different documents than me? Crystal, I'm not sure. I think I might. I might do them in pre-recorded videos though. Oh no, it's okay. He could stay in here. He just has difference of opinion. Did I miss a document? I don't think I did. I don't. What document did I miss a document that she read? Yeah, I read. That's what I just read, Ladybug. If I go to her YouTube and she read the same 2 documents as me, I'm gonna like scream. Can someone tell me if she did? I don't even know how to spell her name. Let me see. I know it is because it's only 53 minutes long. Yeah. Yeah, these are the same documents I just. Oh my goodness. Okay, so we're gonna read the book. We're on part 6. And let me pull this up for you guys because I didn't even do that. Okay. I'm gonna grab my drink really quick too. All right, everybody get comfortable. And I'll get to reading. Okay. Oh, there we go. My camera went on. Okay, so chapter 28. And if you haven't like been with us for the other chapters, you really don't have to kind of be here for the other chapters in order to like pick up what the book's going about. It's basically basing off of a lot of the person that wrote the book is from Moscow, so he's just going by his account of what he experienced and the documents and the interviews and stuff like that. So but it says when Ethan Chapin's mother gave birth to her triplets, Ethan was first out of the womb, followed by his siblings, exactly 1 minute intervals. Ethan and his younger brother Hunter and sister Maisie shared an unusual bond. Of the roughly 3.6 million births in America each year, only about 3,000 are triplet births. Okay, I'm gonna read that again. What was that? So out of 3.6 million births every year in America, only about 3,000 are triplets. Wow. Wow, that's very rare. I mean, I didn't realize how rare that was. Wow. Jim and Stacy felt especially blessed by an instantaneous full family. Full family. The Chapin trio and their parents lived in Mount Vernon, Washington, on the banks of the Skagit River in the Skagit Valley farm country, famous for its tulip industry. In the springtime, the tulip farms were like wide rainbows of color nestled between green forest and the snow-covered mountain peaks that lined the horizon. The Chapin home was spacious on an acre of lush green grass. Jim and Stacy owned Pacific Belting and Supply, selling and installing industrial conveyor belts, and made a nice living. Stacy had also been a teacher early on. I didn't know that's what they did. The triplets attended the small public Conway School in Mount Vernon from kindergarten through 8th grade. It was a close-knit place with parents volunteering for field trips and in the classrooms. Outside school, the Chapins went on family vacations as the kids got older. They had the money and the love, and they didn't skimp on either with their kids. They traveled to the Dominican Republic and kayaked in the sea. I think that's supposed to say but it says surfed. They surfed in Mexico on boards twice as long as the kids were. They walked the beaches in the Bahamas with swim towels draped around their necks. Closer to home, they chartered boats, they golfed together, played tennis, and picked apples, even just sat around the house. The family was active. They planted a box garden on their sprawling lawn and lined it with freshly cut wood chips. Sorry, the green sprouts catching full sunlight. They played basketball in their driveway after dinner with the sun going down and the clouds thinning and their American flag occasionally waving in the breeze. All three of the kids briefly played the clarinet. Played the clarinet too. Ethan enjoyed sports above anything. He played club soccer for years, traveling to weekend tournaments with his brother and sister. At the Conway School, girls and boys played on the same team. Maisie, Hunter, and Ethan all practiced and played together in their matching blue shirts. The only difference was the red headband Maisie wore to keep her long hair pushed back. Conway Superintendent Jeff Cravey spoke to a reporter about Ethan's sporting prowess. He was an amazing basketball player and often got into competitions with staff, especially during staff versus student basketball games, Cravey said. Our love language with him was sports, his mother Stacy told another reporter. She had followed NFL football so she could bond with Ethan to a greater degree. She would send him text messages about the games she was watching. Stacy Chapin knew that sharing her children's passion would keep the family close. All three kids were athletic, so the family's life revolved around physical activities, especially when it came to Ethan. That and country music, his mom said, were his obsessions, and he was a good-natured goof. He was definitely the comedian of the three kids, she added. He always had something funny to say. Was always laughing. Ethan's youth basketball coach, the tattooed and bearded Tyler Amaya, said that to coach him was a pleasure. Ethan had been one of his favorite players and one of the top players on their Skagit County team since elementary school, when he was already tall for his age. He would practice twice a week with Amaya at the basketball gym in Burlington, 10 minutes from home. He always gave you that sincere, genuine eye contact. Amaya told the local Fox station. You knew he was locked in with whatever you were telling him. Amaya and Ethan had stayed in contact over the years, even when Ethan was in college. Amaya could see a bright future for the boy. He lit up many of my dark days, Amaya told another reporter, days where maybe things went wrong for me. Ethan comes into the gym and all of a sudden, everything is meaningful again. I don't have kids, but if I had a daughter, I'd want her to be with Ethan. Big-boned and broad-shouldered, Ethan was among the largest wherever he went. It was hard to imagine him falling prey to violence. In TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube videos, Ethan was always smiling. He wore shorts and shook his booty to any song that was playing, dancing in the living room, in his bedroom, in the kitchen, always dancing, always gyrating for a quick laugh with his strong legs bouncing across the floor. He got drunk with his friends, danced while wearing a woman's bikini top, played beer pong, dressed up as a hot dog, used an upturned safety cone as a bullhorn, sang country music into his fist like it was a microphone. When he was young, he was clean shaven. Later, he grew a mustache. He shot hoops in the sun. He jumped over couches. He looked at the camera. Somebody was pointing at him, and he gave it the peace sign like a hello, but also an exit. Chapter 29. Ethan and his siblings went to Mount Vernon High School, at a stately-looking brick and stone institution that brought Ivy League campuses to mind. The gym and basketball court still had its original 1950s-era wooden bleachers, heavily lacquered with polish to shine. Each side of the nearby weight room was fully stocked with state-of-the-art lifting platforms for power and Olympic-style lifts. The Seattle Times referred to Mount Vernon's athletic facilities as the gold standard of high school gymnasiums and the Sistine Chapel of Washington gyms. For someone like Ethan, it was perfect. He played basketball for the school, and even as a sophomore, he was already 6'4", tied with another boy for the tallest on the Bulldogs team. In a team photo from the air, Ethan is resting his arm across the shoulder of his brother Hunter, also a forward on the team. Hunter, standing 6'3", holds the basketball between his hands like a weapon. Even on the court, they stood side by side. Basketball, more than other sports, held Ethan's heart. He refereed youth basketball on the weekends in Mount Vernon and had a knack for communicating the nuances of the game to younger kids. His own positive experiences with his youth coach had rubbed off. He was shaping into a solid player and was doing well at Mount Vernon, but then the COVID-19 pandemic halted the school's regular operations. Ethan and his siblings left Washington State near the end of their junior year, immersing themselves in the natural world of at the family's North Idaho summer home. They got jobs at the Hills Resort, a getaway loaded with lakeside and forest view cabins abutting the very blue, very pristine Priest Lake. At Hills, there was a restaurant with a stone hearth, boating and canoeing and kayaking, options galore, and volleyball and tennis accommodations. The manicured flowered grounds led directly into the seemingly endless forested hills full of tamaracks and maples which turned bright red in the fall. There was even a nearby golf course with guest boat Mirage. The outdoor deck sat hundreds beneath its red canvas umbrellas and had a view of the waters where bugs dappled the surface and fish jumped to catch them. By autumn, the family had returned to Washington, but not to Mount Vernon High School, which was still dealing with the pandemic shutdowns. The triplets finished their senior year of high school remotely. Ethan also worked in the fields at a Skagit County tulip farm, a 5-acre parcel of nutrient-rich soil brimming with dozens of varieties of vibrant tulips. Ethan, like many of the local kids, went to work preparing, seeding, and harvesting the land. According to his crew leader, Andrew Miller, Ethan set the bar for showing up with a smile and making everyone else happy to be on the job, regardless of the weather or the work. And the weather and the work could be nasty at times, with plenty of rain and an equal measure of hard labor to make things uncomfortable. As a strong kid with a big heart, Ethan was a kind of guy who would do the hardest jobs and never complain, Miller said of him. Ethan and his siblings went back to Priest Lake for another summer working at Hills Resort before all three headed to the University of Idaho. It was the summer before their senior year, but they really had no senior year at all, not in the traditional sense. There had been none of the merrymaking that often accompanies those last months of secondary education, no homecoming or prom with its tuxedo and gowns, no decorating of lockers or vehicles to celebrate graduation. They'd missed all that, and it was frustrating, but at Hills, they could ease back into the beautiful North Idaho landscape and dream about college, which hopefully would be accompanied by a return to their normal social lives. For now, Hills Resort wasn't such a bad stopover. They worked wherever the resort needed them. For Ethan, that was usually in the restaurant where he bussed tables or worked as an expediter in the kitchen, a liaison between the cooks and the waitstaff, making sure the food got plated and served on time. Even when Ethan wasn't scheduled to work, he would sometimes sit at table 42, the tall round table at the resort's dining room, while Maisie worked her shift waiting tables. He'd watch her work, and if she got busy and needed help, Ethan would jump into action. There were times when Ethan had just gotten off the lake from boating and would notice his friends at the restaurant getting slammed with customers. He would run into the dining area in his wet swim trunks and flip-flops to help out. If he wasn't working or boating, he was on the volleyball court or playing another sport, and always he was surrounded by friends. After his murder, there were hundreds of comments about Ethan on the Hills Resort's Facebook page from people who remembered him working in the restaurant those summers. Everywhere in the comments, there were bright red hearts. Jim and Stacy Chapin dropped their triplets off in Moscow on August 13th, 2021. The kids' backpacks were full of essentials, their rolling suitcases toppled with IKEA bags. The sun was shining on every face in the family as they crossed the pavement together towards campus. I wanted to check something really fast. Okay. Empty nesters Stacy Chapin posted on Instagram. She and her husband wore sunglasses in the picture, beneath which she commented, "Only for a few moments did I need them." She was referring to the tears she'd hidden behind her lenses. The family had done everything together for almost 2 decades, and now the kids were embarking on their next adventure without Stacy and Jim, but at least the siblings had one another. Maisie joined Kappa Alpha Theta, a sorority house with a touch of Southern charm to its circular second-story patio and ornately carpeted, meandering staircase inside. Ethan and Hunter joined the Sigma Chi fraternity with its more drabbed accommodations, but a brotherhood the boys could appreciate. Inside the sprawling ranch-style Sigma Chi fraternity house, the living quarters were in sore need of updating. The bathrooms were so infrequently clean they looked like a biohazard. The bedrooms, though cleaner, were designed oddly, with mattresses squeezed closely together atop a series of wood-framed lofts with barely any ceiling clearance. But there was a secluded courtyard where parties could spill outside without much notice from the neighboring streets, from police, or from the university officials. And there was an outdoor basketball hoop and a concrete pad lined with spectacular seating in the form of a dozen battered couches that became soggy in the rain, then dehydrated and filled with pollen by July. Ethan often took advantage of the makeshift court, shooting a basketball through the shifting net that could be seen from Banfield between him and the King Road residence, and he would begin to frequent after meeting Xana. That first fall semester of college, Stacy and Jim visited the kids for parent and family weekend. The family went to dinner together, tailgated, and watched the University of Idaho Vandals football team stomp Southern Utah for a 42-24 victory. Later, they played cornhole, tossing beanbags in the dark in front of the Sigma Chi fraternity house. Stacy posted about the day on her Instagram account. It was perfect. University of Idaho for the win. Ethan, like most kids just getting to college after 2 years of COVID lockdowns, was experiencing the joy of finally socializing with his peers again, but also the mild discomfort that accompanied renewed confinement to classrooms. According to an English department advisor, he was struggling slightly with the curriculum, but he was passing his courses and excelling socially. And he'd become friends with Xana Coronado, then started dating her. Stacy and Jim continued to bring their triplets together for family vacations, so life for the Chapin kids hadn't changed much. It had just gotten better. They had their freedom and they had their comforts they'd grown up with at the same time. They spent their 2021 Christmas holiday at Priest Lake Vacation Home. Maisie worked as a waitress at Hills during Christmas break, and she was excited to be with her parents or be her parents' server when they ate there, bringing drinks and copper mugs to their lacquered table, the snow outside through the dining room windows, weighing down the branches of the tamarack trees. For spring break, the family went to Mexico and swam in an infinity pool overlooking the ocean just north of Porter Vallarta. The water was blue and the wind was in the palm trees lining their resort. The summer after Ethan's freshman year, Xana got a taste of the seemingly luxurious lifestyle and cozy vibes that accompanied hanging out with the Chapin family. That was the summer Ethan brought her to Priest Lake. They spent time on the boat together when golfing took heights. Xana had started following Ethan's mother's Instagram account and had begun to like her photos. In one, a small herd of deer trotted across the golf course nestled between the groves of evergreen trees. In another, a turtle was released into a pond. Everything seemed perfect, even the family's vacation home. It was over 3,000 square feet of timber frame construction and had vaulted ceilings, 4 bedrooms, and a 4-car garage on just under 2 acres that looked out at the 12th green of the Priest Lake golf course. Ethan's girlfriend had come a long way from the circumstances of her first few years, and Ethan had been happy to bring her into the fold. That fall semester, the two of them started spending time at the King Road residence. Dylan Mortensen, Xana's second-floor roommate there, called Ethan and Xana the two best friends, but perfect pair together. They both would look at each other with so much love, she wrote in a note that was read at their memorial. Everyone knew they were a perfect duo, and they both had this fun, passionate, crazy, but good energy. He was so sweet and loving to Xana, she said. Xana was like his whole world, and you could see that in him. And Dylan felt Ethan's love as well, but differently. I got to experience what an older brother would be like, she said. He was easygoing and easy to talk to. Bethany Funk, the first-floor roommate, said similar things, that in Ethan's presence, the whole vibe of the room would go up and everyone was just instantly happier. Ethan and Xana's relationship, Bethany said, made people believe in true love. On November 6, 2022, Stacy and Jim went back to the University of Idaho campus for their second parent and family weekend. All 5 of the family members stood together outside the Sigma Chi house for a photograph. There were leaves on the ground, and Stacy, a red mug in her hand, proudly wore a University of Idaho jacket. The rest of her family held red Solo cups, the sun in their eyes, and a flush on their faces from the autumn weather. Ethan stood between his mother and sister, towering over them, his long arms draping around their shoulders. The dimples in his cheeks were as wide as nickels when he smiled. Jim and Stacy could tell their triplets were doing well at school. We will no longer have to worry about these kids, Stacy said as they headed back home 1 week before Ethan's murder. Hunter Johnson met Ethan during rush week when freshmen interested in the Greek system make the rounds of fraternity or sorority houses, which lure them with friendships and parties, hoping to curry memberships. Hunter was already a member of Phi Delta Theta when Ethan came through. The Pi Delta chapter at Eastern Washington University, an hour away, would be sanctioned in the coming year for hazing rituals, getting their pledges drunk, blindfolding them, and shoving them into a forest for the night. The University of Idaho Phi Delta had no such hazing complaints and were in good standing with the university when Ethan toured its facilities. Ethan was the first boy Hunter spoke with during rush week. To Hunter, Ethan seemed goofy, but in a fun way, someone the equally tall and athletic Hunter could look forward to playing basketball with. Although Ethan eventually chose another fraternity, Sigma Chi, the two boys enjoyed a lasting bond. They partied together, double dated, played sports in their free time, and visited Hunter's family cabin together. Hunter often snuck the underage Ethan's booze into parties for him. During the summer of 2022, Hunter and his girlfriend Emily frequently went golfing with Ethan and Xana. Ethan's charismatic personality and infectious smile would light up the course those days. At the memorial in Post Falls, Hunter would stand at the podium and tell the crowd, "You knew it was going to be a good time when we had more drinks in our bag than we did golf balls." Eventually, Hunter would break into tears. Hunter was on hand for 2 of the police noise complaint visits to 1122 King Road in the months before the murders. A second video of the August 16th body cam footage shot from the vantage point of an officer who remained primarily along the perimeter of the residence while the incident unfolded fleshes out the events and Hunter's part in them from a different angle. During the late afternoon get-together, Hunter accompanied Kaylee Gonzalez through 1122 King Road's second-floor sliding glass door to meet police officers responding to a noise complaint made against the house on the back deck. It was hot outside, and Hunter's blue Nike-branded polo-style golf shirt was unzipped to his sternum. His shoes were also Nike's retro white with the black swoosh that come back into style with college kids a few years ago. Hunter walked cautiously, then sat on the curb alert couch while an officer questioned Kaylee about the noise levels coming from the inside. The sun made a direct hit, and Hunter rubbed his forehead with the back of his hand, momentarily pushing aside his floppy middle-parted hair. He wore a white zip tie on his right wrist with another zip tie hanging from the first, seemingly remnants from a recent party in the Greek system. Zip tie parties are a form of group drinking game in which 2 people are cuffed together until they consumed a predetermined quota of alcohol. With his left hand, Hunter blocked the sun from his face, squinting through his fingertips at the officers and at the portable beer pong table and red Solo cups in a stack behind them. Then he unexpectedly stood up again while one of the officers was still talking to Kaylee. Sunlight hit the zipper on Hunter's shirt as he turned back towards the house. The officer's black shadow landed against the couch where Hunter had been sitting. Kaylee received her verbal warning, but Hunter was already inside by then. 2 weeks later, on September 1st, 2022, as previously mentioned, Hunter, accompanied by a friend, again greeted Moscow police officers at the front door to 1122 King Road after this particular night's initial noise complaint had been made. Hunter wore a light gray polo shirt, dark hued shorts, and his Nikes. He could see from the doorway that there were a lot of cops outside. Some stood in the driveway, some closer to the door. One of them had asked to speak to a legal tenant, but Hunter explained, "So I just looked for everyone that lives here, and they're not here right now." "No one's here that lives here at all?" the officer asked. Hunter shook his head. "No one's here that lives here," he said. After some back and forth about whether or not the partygoers were trespassing, the officer asked, "Who does live here? What are their names?" Hunter's friend spoke up. "I am actually not sure," the boy said. Hunter shook his head again as if to say, "I don't know either." In the second body cam video, as the officer approached the residence, 2 young women in denim shorts quickly exited the driveway on foot, sliding towards the darker edges to avoid coming face to face with police. He trained his flashlight on them, cornering them with the halo. You guys haven't been drinking or anything, right? No, the girl said. Okay, drive careful. Okay. Thanks, one of the girls said. The officer continued to approach the house. He was accompanied by his ride-along, a civilian who shadows a police officer for training or educational purposes. It's hilarious, the officer chuckled. As soon as they know it's the cops, they just blend into the darkness. He chuckled again when another of the responding officers yelled to the window upstairs window, "We're only here for a noise complaint. Come to the damned door." The second floor window were rectangles of light. We'll figure out who lives here eventually, the body cam officer said to his ride-along. Several more minutes passed. Nobody had yet answered the door. The officer radioed his dispatcher. Moscow 157, do we have any recent involvements at 1122 Queen, he asked, mistaking the address the way it would again be mistaken on the phone with Maddie. Hunter and his friend could be heard finally opening the door and engaging with the other responding officers. The audio captured one of the cops popping the Truly vodka seltzer cans and spilling them into the weeds, and caught Hunter avoiding straight answers to their questions. No, there was nobody present who lived in the house. No, he did not know their names. The sound of Hunter's voice crossed the darkness. The second body camera caught nuances that the first one hadn't. How poorly lit the grounds were at night, how easily a human form could slink towards the peripheral unseen. This footage came from the chest camera worn by Corporal Brett Payne, who only 2 months later would take the lead on the King Road homicide investigations. He'd walk through the scene, taking note of the bodies and of so much blood everywhere. Hunter Johnson, who played a drunken game of verbal cat and mouse with Payne's team just months ago, had reportedly made the 911 call. Chapter 32. 2 a.m. is a dark hour. That's what Stacy Chapin told a Seattle reporter soon after her son's murder. She was referring to the sleepless, horrible nights the family was enduring together, struggling to understand what had happened and how to move through it. On November 30th, 2022, Stacy walked to the podium at the University of Idaho Vigil. She seemed comfortable on stage, and her voice, perhaps from her years of teaching, projected well in the hushed auditorium. I'm Stacy Chapin, she said. I'm Ethan's mom. Then she broke down crying. Eventually, she said, the University of Idaho is a special place for our family personally. Our triplets enrolled here together because of the small town feel, the beautiful campus, and the Greek system. Those were all mandatory must-haves when picking a school. She sniffled above the microphone. The people here were kind and welcoming when we showed up for orientation, and we knew as a family that we'd made the right choice. A photo of Ethan as a teenager appeared on the screen of the network streaming the event. He wore a blue flannel shirt, and his hair across his forehead looked windswept. The circumstances that brought us here tonight, they're terrible. The hardest part, we cannot change the outcome. Stacy Chapin looked out over the crowd of faces. Our family is probably no different than your family, she said. We sat at the dinner table when time permitted. We played games together. We traveled. We hauled our kids to every new sporting event imaginable. We had cribbage tournaments, pickleball competitions, and basketball shooting contests. We served and spent countless hours on our boat listening to country music, which was Ethan's most favorite thing in the whole world. In fact, the Chapin family did seem a little different. They seemed like they had it all, and many don't. They had done their best to make the most of it. But the most important thing is that in our family, we always had each other's backs, and we will continue to do so. A young woman in the audience was crying. A young man stood behind her, holding on. We are eternally grateful that we spent so much time with him, Stacy said through tears. She addressed the audience more directly now. That's the most important message that we have for you and your families, is to make sure that you spend as much time as possible with the people, because time is precious and it's something you can't get back. She thanked the Moscow Police Department, the FBI, and the Idaho State Police for their continued efforts in helping to find the King Road murderer. She also thanked the worldwide followers of the case, many of whom had been reaching out with condolences over social media. Please continue to support all four of our families, she added, and please be kind. Her husband, Jim, didn't speak. Through the many interview requests and the glare of news cameras and photographers chasing down their family, Jim had said very few words other than to agree with his wife or to console with her with understanding looks when she cried. The pain on Jim's face and the flush along his cleanly shaven head said it all that rightly mattered to him. His boy was gone and wasn't coming back. When Jim finally did speak at any length, it was in the spring to Good Morning America, filming him and Stacy at Washington State Tulip Farm. Yellow and white tulips lined the soil in long rows across a large, healthy acreage. The wind seemed to come from a long ways off. It's tough, Jim said softly in a voice that seemed to have gathered from tears at the back of his throat. He wore a yellow University of Idaho ball cap and a gray hoodie beneath his black University of Idaho puffy jacket. He still had his other two kids going to school, and that was something to be proud of. They still needed his support, even if a piece of his heart had disappeared with Ethan. Tough not having him here. Stacy and I get up, watch the sunrise, and drink our coffee. He shook his head, searching for words. His ears were red from the wind, and his eyes were red around the rims from sadness. Cry on our coffee, he added. That's how we spent their mornings, even months later, even when spring had been blossoming from the ground, when rain clouds instead of snow clouds gathered overhead. Spring was a long ways from now, though. Coping would take all winter and the rest of the winter ahead of them, too. Oh, there she goes with her ears. Hold on one second. Okay. I think she's just getting comfortable. We'll keep going. She's just getting comfortable over here. We'll read a little bit more. We'll see. Let me see. Okay, I think, well, it looks like it's about the same amount. We'll see. We'll see how far we go. Okay, because we're on part 7 now. So it didn't take long for the trickle of media the first days after the murders to become a roaring flash flood. It was no longer 20 or 30 reporters seen walking around campus or trapezing, I can't ever say that word, over the downtown Moscow sidewalks or camped in front of the police station in their puffy jackets. It was 100 or more vying for access at any given time, access to cops or to King Road neighbors or to the students who'd returned to the campus after Thanksgiving break. Especially coveted was access to the victims' family members, but who by now were turning off their phones and pulling their drapes closed against the cameras that had found their homes. Media representatives held notepads and long lenses and audio recorders and searched for headlines, mostly in rugged North Idaho and sometimes downstate in Boise, tracking survivor Dylan Mortensen, but also in Washington, where Ethan's family lived, or in Arizona, chasing after Jeff Kernodle, Xana's father. Access was gold. Reporters couldn't write the King Road story without it, and the process of obtaining that access was simply a numbers game to those covering the Moscow case. The aim was to tactfully bother everybody and hope that a few would talk. Those who had flown to Moscow on their network's corporate dime had the most time to spend looking for leads. They stayed in hotel rooms for weeks on end, ate the same continental breakfast each day, and soon drove the same slippery roads each morning in the dark once the weather had changed, and it changed quickly on them. By early December, 15 inches of snow covered the ground outside the murder house, and the streets in the neighborhood were a sheet of ice. News Nation's senior national correspondent, Brian Enton, go Brian, was often seen in the King Road parking lot, sometimes standing atop a lighting case to add height for better framing in the camera lens. When the ground was made uneven by snowfall, his crew equipment shielded by an industrial-sized black umbrella. The temperature dipped to 1 degree, and the LED lights aimed at Enton provided the only exterior heat in the neighborhood. Between shots, and loitered with his hands in his pockets for warmth, his facial expressionless under a base layer of makeup as he waited to go live. Sometimes he texted with Kaylee Gonzalez's family, who believed in the value of keeping Kaylee's story in the press, at least until her killer was caught. With Enton's insider access to the Gonzalez family as a good starting point, he began to report on the homicides daily, and News Nation saw a tsunami-like surge in viewership. Moscow was also overrun with less pedigreed YouTubers trying to make their names in true crime reporting genre. Oh, I guess I can guess. I could guess who those were, Betty. The monetization of their channels paid for their travel, and in that sense, they operated their businesses no differently than the big networks. Clicks on their videos meant cash for their coffers, and cash allowed their operation to be run and the story to be told. Well, I guess if you got those people donating like that, yeah. But while a major network usually covered the case with agreed upon decorum, freelancers profited more from showing personality. Oh, I did. I already look at this. Bullhorn Betty, an affiliated citizen reporting on the homicides, opened each of her YouTube segments as if they were splashy TV commercials for used cars. Sorry. That's the truth. Betty's color palette for the case was a hot pink, icy blue, and cupcake frosting white. Her Venmo, Cash App, and PayPal identifiers scroll beneath the screen, soliciting donations. Do you see them of mine? No, you don't. And a pop punk soundtrack screamed as loudly as her tag, instructing followers to hit the like button. Hey, if you guys don't mind, we hit the like button. I haven't asked you to do that all night. There was a contrast between design and content in Bullhorn Betty's channel. Though the subject was as grim as they come, Betty's presentation was 1980s glam and her audience ate it up. 1980s glam, I'm sorry. On the day the Chief Fry had ordered the victims' vehicles towed from the murder house, Betty walked gingerly along the iced over street out front. She wore a pink winter coat, gold hoop earrings the size of mason jar lids, bejeweled sunglasses, and a knitted pink cap pulled down tightly. She held a cell phone filming the scene. A late model tow truck had begun to hitch and remove Ethan and his brother Hunter shared four-door cherry red Jeep Wrangler. It looked newish and expensive. Betty's grainy footage showed her primary camera woman holding a DSLR camera. Are they talking about Olivia? Is he calling Olivia her camera woman? He is. The young woman filmed the tow truck as it veered out of the driveway. Off camera, Betty shouted excitedly, "Oh, hey." She ran after somebody, then came back to explain to her viewers that she had just been talking with News Nation's Enton. We met Brian Enton when he wasn't a whole lot of anything, she told her fans, breath puffing from her mouth in the bitter cold. He only had about 20,000 followers when we first met him. Oh, wait, hold on. This is too good. And we ran into him throughout the country following these cases. You don't follow cases, Betty. You grift from cases. Let's get that right. By these cases, Betty meant the trail of murder across America, the bread and butter of her channel, and the hundreds of other YouTubers doing the same thing she was. When a big homicide case hit the news or social media, they jumped into their cars or booked airline tickets and chased down the story. What's this? This guy kind of did the same thing, though. He got the interview with Dylan's dad. Kayla Gonzalez's Range Rover was sheeted with ice in the driveway. Police officers monitored the tow truck activity, and the traditional press corps had lined up directly across from the driveway, their lenses all pointing in the same direction. Did he just skip the part about Betty spitting in the freaking guy's face that lived there? Okay. Maybe he'll come to that. Oh, here we go. Emotions. There we go. Maybe he'll get to that. Betty started to say, describing to her followers how it felt to be at the scene. Oh my God. It gets to you being here, feeling the vibe, the terror. She seemed genuinely overwhelmed. She was breathing heavily. The tow truck driver appeared to be wrestling with his chain. Something wasn't working right, and another man had walked across the snow to help. But then Betty added, "Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Please consider making a donation to PayPal, Cash App, or Venmo." I guess she might need to go out. The cloud covers. She's barking at the dog. I'm kicking her out. Hold on one sec. Sorry about that. I was like, I knew she was going to cry the whole time. She wanted to be where she was sitting. Sisters. The cloud covered sky cast tones of muted gray across everything in sight. The press corps kept snapping their photos. Later in the day, they'd hurry to the impound yard for more. I can't express how painful this cold is on my hands, Betty said. That's what makes her so good at true crime, you know? I just can't express how painful this is. My hands are just so painful while you're standing in front of a house where 4 people were knifed to death, Betty. I can't even talk about that one without getting mad. I can't express how painful. Oh my gosh. It says, Betty said her exposed fingers had gone pink in the frigid air. Oh yeah, she had those gloves on that like the holes were in them. I never get that. Why are you wearing gloves then? If they're going to have holes in each finger. By the end of her 2-hour video, only police cars remained in the parking lot and a few of the press corps vehicles idled in a row along the street, burning fuel while their gear was packed into the rear hatches. Over the next few months, Bullhorn Betty continued to cover the case, printing money, as she said, about her channel, but Betty also spoke on camera to her viewers about the psychological cost of pursuing the grisly real-life crimes. Pain and darkness, she said, accompanied her continued exposure to the case. Like the opposite of rose-colored glasses, hers made everything in the world look bleak. When they weren't on camera, the traditional press corps in Moscow often looked blank-faced and I don't know why I can't say this.
By the end of her 2-hour video, only police cars remained in the parking lot.
I didn't want you to do the whole thing. Sorry, I just did the whole thing.
Along the street, burning fuel.
How do you admit it to stop?
Into the rear hatches. By the end of her 2-hour video,
okay.
Only police cars remained in the parking lot.
It's going to go by the whole thing.
The press corps vehicles idled in a row along the street.
It's still doing it.
Fuel while their gear was packed into the rear hatches.
Sorry, I only wanted to know one thing.
Betty continued to cover the case, printing money, as she said about her channel. But Betty also spoke on camera to the viewers about the psychological cost of pursuing the grisly real-life crimes. Pain and darkness, she said, accompanied her continued exposure to the case. Like the opposite of rose-colored glasses, hers made everything in the world look bleak. When they were
I did one word.
The traditional press corps in Moscow often looked blank-faced and beleaguered. 2.
Beleaguered.
Access wasn't free, perhaps. It was just a way in. Chapter 34.
Oh, is it going to do all these?
Social media.
Okay, hold on. Chapter 20, 34.
Citizens were reporting on the case as well.
Hold on.
The fastest, most compulsive coverage began on Reddit.
Wow, it was going to do the whole book. Okay, we were on chapter 34. Yeah, okay. I was just making sure. Okay, so access wasn't free, perhaps. It was just a way in. That was the last thing. And let me share this with you guys. I was like, I only wanted her to say one word, and she was speaking out all the words. Sorry about that. Across social media, dozens of other unaffiliated citizens were reporting on the case as well. The fastest, most compulsive coverage began on Reddit and 4chan, then trickled across Facebook, where one dedicated group, the University of Idaho Murders Case Discussion, had grown to 250,000 users posting daily. More often than not, the Facebook post played off mainstream media's reporting. Whatever had made it to network news was disseminated online by group members eager to discuss what they'd learned from nationally respected anchors. Sometimes it was the other way around. National news anchors played off what they'd heard from social media. Reddit user post eerily accurate Idaho crime details was the headline on a leading national network in the early days after the murders. The segment included 3 law enforcement experts weighing in for months afterward that Reddit users' comments about the murder weapon and positioning of the bodies was discussed by multiple anchors and their law enforcement consultants. News Nation's Ashley Banfield reminded viewers that there had been a serial killer in Canada that the online community found before the police found him, and that the police ignored them. So there are some lessons to be learned from that. And there are some things the community can actually help with in terms of investigation. The investigative work of citizen sleuths, in other words, could be compelling. They scanned the victim's old social media for clues, but also did more traditional research like private investigators. They made phone or in-person inquiries of associates of the victims, mined public databases for documents, and created false social media accounts to conduct social surveillance on people they suspected of involvement in the murders. Some citizen sleuths went so far as to perform in-person surveillance of associate residents, then doxed their addresses, posting them online for those who wanted to look even further into someone they concluded might be a potential suspect. And welcome in, everybody. It was risky business. For every helpful tip armchair investigators uncovered, there were multiple instances of misplaced suspicions and harm to innocent citizens. 4chan users theorized that the murders were revenge for a fraternity squabble, with Ethan as the killer's initial target. This led to dozens of posts on Reddit and finally on Facebook, where the theory was discussed thousands of times. It seemed plausible fraternity infighting, crossed lovers at the center of the chaos, dark secrets. It seems almost impossible to think that the perpetrator was focused on one of the girls and was willing or able to take on Ethan, said a Redditor. The perpetrator was actually focused on Ethan, and killing the girls may have been to throw Ellie off. This theory didn't stop at idle speculation. Citizen sleuths named the parties involved and drew links between them, in the animosity they imagined went all the way back to high school. In short order, the students and fraternity members allegedly associated with the squabble began to receive death threats from strangers. Several of them reportedly went into hiding. One of Ethan's fraternity brothers spoke out about the wild conjectures on Twitter. It is one thing to be wrong, but it is an entirely different thing to be peddling a false narrative with poorly vetted sources to generate engagement for your profile. Please, or leave us alone, please, he pleaded. Jack DeCour received death threats too, simply because he had been Kaylee's lover and he'd been scorned by her and vengeful, the sleuths decided. And a U of I professor started getting death threats after a TikToker claimed she had put a hit on the residents on 1122 King Road. A neighbor on King Road also began getting threats after social media mob deemed him creepy in interviews he gave to the media about living so close to a horrible tragedy. Most of the rumor and speculation occurred during lieu of investigative updates from the Moscow Police Department. Lies and conjecture spun wildly inside the information vacuum, even though it had been only days since Chief Fry's last press conference. Even the mainstream media wasn't above winging it when the facts weren't available. Between official updates, they interviewed ex-law enforcement agents with expertise in homicide investigations, but these experts sometimes set aside critical analysis in favor of their own tiltating speculation. One ex-agent regurgitated the rumors that Kaylee had a stalker, even though the Moscow PD had already debunked the theory. The former agent, I'm going to say Jennifer Koffendorfer, had gotten, it says his. Who is this? The former agent. Who would be a former agent? That was a guy. Now, I don't know. I was just going to say her because it sounds like Jennifer Koffendorfer, but I think I know who it is. I can't think of his name. I'll have to think about it. The former agent that had gotten his information from days old news. Sometimes more insightful was the commentary on Facebook by those would-be agents too young or uncredited or uncredentialed to participate in official law enforcement circles. In a forum dedicated to the case, somebody posted a blown-up photo of Kaylee's wrist isolating her smartwatch. Within hours, hundreds of commenters discussed whether the watch perhaps synced to an Alexa or other digital Conridge might have recorded the sound of Kaylee's murder, screams in the dark, or a tussle that caused the watch recorder to activate. That would be so unheard of. The line of inquiry was unique to our time, but not to be discarded simply because it originated on non-traditional investigative platforms. In fact, while retired agents tended to focus their commentary on the headlines fed to them by corporate anchors, social media sleuths acted independently, which could be more conducive to investigative creativity. In the Facebook photo, Kaylee's watch brought to mind the information-rich black box aviation investigators dig from the rubble after airplane crashes. Was she wearing her watch at the time of her death? If so, what did it try to tell her? Did it vibrate, for instance, when Kaylee's heart rate exceeded its optimal beats per minute? What did her heartbeat sound like after 4 a.m. in the loneliest of hours? If she was wearing her watch, which I would assume she would be, because normally when you have an Apple Watch, you always wear it. That's the point of having it. So yeah, if she still owned it, she would probably have it on that night. We could always check the food truck video. When John Gilman, a formidable looking former Navy SEAL and FBI agent, appeared on Fox News, the anchor began the interview by stating, "The headline today really is that there isn't one. There is no information on who committed this crime." She was referring to the Moscow PD's recent policy of withholding case details and progress reports from the media, as well as the family members of the victims, essentially shutting them out of the investigation and shutting the viewing public out too. Gilliam interjected, "I don't blame them at all. The family members have been on podcasts, they've been on newscasts, and law enforcement is going to automatically pull back on information they provided if that occurs." What he was most interested in talking about was the killer. The perp would be a young male, Gilliam speculated, and somebody who was probably odd to be around, who made people feel uncomfortable. Steve Gonzalez understood the need for more eyeballs on his daughter's case, and he did the news circuit more frequently, now appearing sometimes twice daily, usually by split screen, but sometimes in person with national news correspondents braving the snow to meet him. On air, Gonzalez frequently accused the Moscow PD of moving too slowly to find a suspect, and he praised social media sleuths for their diligence. On camera, he looked agitated, anxious, or on the verge of tears, and sometimes all three. Gonzalez said he was praying that the extra attention the millions chattering would lead to finding Kaylee's killer, because it looked to him as if Moscow PD's relatively inexperienced homicide team might let the case go cold. Chief Fry went on local Fox station to address the fears. "This case is not going cold," he smirked. "We have tips coming in. We have investigators out every day interviewing people. We're still reviewing evidence. We're still looking at all aspects. No stone will go unturned." He'd been working around the clock, and he cared about the families. "I'm a dad," he said, his eyes filled with tears. "With daughters," he added, "and that's tough." His small town police department had been raked across the coals by mainstream media that week. He talked about visiting crime scenes like the one at 1122 King Road. "We're human," Fry said. "We don't go to these and just turn it off. It affects us, but we have a job to do, and we're going to continue to do that job. We're going to continue to push forward." He wanted his community, and most important, the families of the victims, to know that the police department was doing everything it could. Chief Fry would find whoever was responsible for the murders, and that was the promise he made. Kaylee's family couldn't take it on faith. They continued making appearances, and Christy and Steve and their elder daughter, Olivia, sat with Brian Enton at the Gonzalez home in North Idaho on December 3rd, 2022. Their furniture in their living room was country clean, with a throw design like American flag draped over a bench. They sat on a leather couch, a large poster board mounted photograph of Kaylee behind them. Kaylee's and Maddie's ashes were in containers next to each other's on the shelf. Maddie's family had wanted it that way for now. The Gonzalezes had also been growing impatient with the police department's lack of transparency about their progress and about their suspects list. "Is there anyone that you have a weird feeling about that the girls knew or that comes to mind?" Enton asked. "Not in the immediate circle," Olivia stated, "but a few of the names that have been circulating around, I think it's hard not to dig into. I don't know how much of that is because we have so little information from law enforcement, and how much of it is a sister or father's intuition." Christy Gonzalez said she felt as if the police had been too quick to clear a number of acquaintances of the victims. Kaylee's sister agreed, but carefully added that Jack DeCour, Kaylee's on again, off again, had the full support of their family despite online rumors. Other acquaintances had provided alibis that cleared them, but the police had not shared those alibis with the Gonzalez family. If they had, Steve said the family might have felt more comfortable with the rigor of their processes. "I don't know what would prevent you from sharing somebody's alibi," Kaylee's father said. "I think that's what we're struggling with," Olivia agreed. Kaylee's mother began to cry during the interview. The strings of her turquoise hoodie tied in a bow, her auburn hair in a ponytail. It's terrible, she said. I cannot fathom in my head what kind of person did this and why. Her daughter rubbed her arm periodically. Enton noted that the Gonzalezes were postponing Kaylee's funeral until a killer was caught. They couldn't move forward, they had said, with the thought of somebody still out there in the shadows. Are you nervous at all? Enton asked. Because in Moscow, we talk to students. People are really nervous there. They should be, Steve interrupted. He went on to talk about Moscow PD's use of the word targeted to describe the killings. He didn't like that. He felt that the terminology pitted the parents of each victim against one another. If Kaylee had been the target, for instance, did the other parents harbor resentment against the Gonzalez family? Worse, against Kaylee. It was a tough question to wrestle with while mourning their daughter. All of the things for Moscow PD to go public with, this one stung. Enton suggested maybe that was just a way to calm people down. I feel like it was strategic. Gonzalez agreed. If the killings hadn't been random, that would reassure students that they had nothing to fear. Nobody was coming for them next. It was a strategic way to keep people from hitting the door, transferring out, and turning that place into a ghost town. Even with Fry's statements, many students had returned to campus with trepidation. They walked in groups now. They carried weapons in their backpacks. They looked over their shoulders when they walked home at night. Snow had recently covered the impromptu flower memorials that had been placed around the U of I campus. You never think you're going to lose your little sister. Never, Olivia said. You never think you're going to have to bury your sister. Absolutely unbelievable, Christy said. She wiped her hair from her face. Her wedding ring sparkled. She closed her eyes, breaking into tears. Fry hadn't revealed much about his investigation, but by the end of November, the Moscow PD had already had a suspect on their radar. It would take another month before anybody outside of law enforcement would know it, and that was intentional. On November 25th, 12 days after the murders, the Moscow PD asked area law enforcement agencies to be on the lookout for a white sedan that forensic examiners now believe to be a Hyundai Elantra. Only 4 days later, on November 29th, Washington State University police officer Daniel Tinigo looked into white Elantras registered at WSU. He found one registered to a PhD candidate, Brian Kohlberger, who lived in a student apartment complex. Another WSU officer, Curtis Whitman, was also looking for Elantras on that date and found the same vehicle while patrolling. It was parked at the Steptoe Village Apartments. The Hyundai both officers had identified had Washington State license plates on front and back, but records showed that on the date of the murders, the vehicle had been registered in Pennsylvania, where no front plate was required. The out-of-state student had changed his vehicle registration to Washington just over a week ago. Kohlberger's Washington State driver's license information was reviewed by police. He was a white male, 6 foot tall, and 185 pounds. He fit the general description provided to investigators by Dylan Mortensen. Evidence of driving a white Hyundai Elantra and having the approximate stature and look of the suspected killer wouldn't make a case, but Fry's task force started running Kohlberger's down. His study and criminology were notable to the cops. They already had Kohlberger's cell phone. He'd been stopped by police for a minor driving violation in Moscow on August 21st. They ran his cell phone through their databases and found that he had been issued by AT&T, which they served with a narrow warrant to identify any of the company's numbers that had pinged or utilized in this instance, the tower servicing King Road at the approximate time of the murders. Fry's team was hoping that Kohlberger's cell phone would place him at the location of the 4 students' deaths. What they found was the opposite, that between 3 a.m. and nearly 5 a.m. on November 13th, Kohlberger's cell used no towers at all, meaning it had likely been turned off, but only for that period. He might have turned it off before sleep, like many people at that hour, or he might have turned his phone off intentionally before committing his crimes to prevent law enforcement from tracking it. The initial AT&T subpoena had covered only the towers near the murder house. The absence of information on Kohlberger during those hours justified the filing of a broader warrant to obtain Kohlberger's full cell phone records between November 12th and November 14th, the day before and after the murders. This took time to get. Days had already passed with Fry biting his tongue, not able to talk publicly about his promising lead that pointed to a criminology student. Court records later suggested that the task force had put Kohlberger under surveillance, although their methods were kept secret. When they finally became available, the AT&T records confirmed that those approximately 2 early morning hours were the only time Kohlberger's phone had been turned off. It was a good piece of circumstantial evidence he seemed to have been intentionally invading cell towers. The AT&T records also showed that the user of Kohlberger's phone, presumably Kohlberger, was traveling away from Kohlberger's apartment at approximately 2:47 a.m. on November 13th, and then south through Pullman when the phone stopped reporting to the network, either switched into airplane mode or turned off. It began reporting to the network again at 4:48 a.m., less than 30 minutes after the murders, when it pinged on US 95 south of Moscow. The phone pinged towers in a circuitous route throughout the countryside before returning to Kohlberger's residence in Pullman, where the phone pinged again at approximately 5:30 and stayed there for several hours. Then the cell tower activity at approximately 9 a.m. showed Kohlberger's phone traveling away from his residence again and returning to Moscow. It pinged a tower servicing the King Road residence at 9:12 a.m. Astoundingly, the record suggested that Kohlberger may have been to the murder scene that morning, hours after the crimes had been committed, or at least his phone had. It continued to ping the King Road tower until 9:21 a.m. when he departed again. While it appeared that Kohlberger had visited the area around 1122 King Road for 9 minutes that Sunday morning, what he was doing there only he knew. The police had not been called to the scene. The police had not yet been called to the crime scene, and the house would have almost looked exactly as it had the night before, only now he would be viewing it in daylight. The police department now tracked his cell phone tower pings even further back and discovered he had made a dozen visits to the home in the months leading up to the murders, primarily under cover of darkness. One visit occurred in the late night hours prior to his August 21st traffic stop. His phone had pinged the King Road cell tower for over an hour. It appeared that he'd been pulled over on his way home. Not surprisingly, time codes of video surveillance of the Elantra appear to sync tightly with the cell tower data collected by investigators. Where the phone went, so had the white Elantra, or the Hyundai Elantra. It traveled away from Kohlberger's residence at 2:44 a.m. as observed on WSU campus security cameras. The phone had pinged that same area at 2:47, indicative of the phone and car traveling together. While the phone was turned off, the car continued to trigger footage as it moved towards the King Road residence. The Hyundai had made its speedy departure from the scene at 4:20 a.m. Approximately 28 minutes after the murders, when the phone was turned back on, the white Hyundai Elantra and the phone were synced by cell towers and video surveillance. They were taking the same route. The conclusion seemed obvious. Brian Kohlberger had left his apartment, turned his phone off, then driven to the murder house where he'd likely killed Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogen, Xander Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. After the murders, he had sped away. He traveled deep into the countryside for approximately an hour before returning home. And in full daylight later that morning, he had briefly returned to the crime scene. Fry's team had a lot of questions they still couldn't answer. What had Kohlberger been doing in the hour immediately after the crimes, driving through a countryside so dark that if he had pulled to the side and cut his headlights, his eyes would have struggled to focus? Had he pitched the murder weapon, his clothes? They would have to wait for those answers, and they would need more evidence before they could initiate an arrest. But the evidence was accumulating by the day, almost more important than the rest of what they've been tracking. Kohlberger's name had appeared in a recently obtained genetic genealogy results Fry's team had been awaiting. The DNA left behind on the knife sheath was a match to Kohlberger's family line. There was one small problem. Kohlberger had left the area weeks ago. We have a couple more chapters and then we're done. Classes at WSU had ended for Christmas break in early December. Kohlberger, a PhD candidate with the teaching assistantship, had finished grading his students' papers. He had packed his white Hyundai Elantra with his belongings on December 12th, then departed campus for a 2,500-mile drive across the United States back to his hometown of Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, in the Pocono Mountains. Riding shotgun with Kohlberger was a 67-year-old father, Michael, a tall, heavy-set man with the physique of an aging football player. Michael had flown west from Pennsylvania to accompany his son on the long drive back home, squeezing his large body into the passenger seat of the sedan as they set out. Instead of driving directly across the northern United States, Kohlberger took a longer southern route through the mountains west, reportedly to avoid a whiteout snowstorm in parts of Idaho and Montana. On December 13th, his white Elantra was seen by an automated license plate reader in Loma, Colorado, where the car had been cut east on I-70. On December 15th, a Hancock County, Indiana sheriff deputy flagged down Kohlberger and his father on the interstate just past Indianapolis. Kohlberger pulled his Elantra to the far right shoulder where a small hillside of grass had gone muddy with melting snow. The FBI was reportedly tailing Kohlberger as he traveled. The methods they used remain undisclosed, but traditionally the process involved unmarked vehicles or small low-flying surveillance planes, even high-tech drones, all coupled with a robust system of license plate readers dotting the map. The feds were reportedly monitoring from afar as the sheriff's deputies got out of his vehicle and approached the passenger side window of the Hyundai. The ensuing interaction recorded by his body cam. Michael Kohlberger rolled down the passenger side window. He had 2 bankruptcies over the years and had a lot of sad trouble with his son, drug abuse, and an interaction with the law when at 19 he allegedly stole one of his sister's phones and sold it, according to a subsequent news report. And the boy had always had a difficult time making friends. So he was 19 when he stole it. I'm writing that down because I thought he was 16 for some reason. So I want to remember that. But I do my math because I'm doing my math for my William project. He looked up at the deputy approaching. "How are you doing today?" the deputy asked, boldly leaning his forearm across the interior of the door. Michael Kohlberger nodded, leaning backward slightly. He squinted upward through his glasses, waiting for more information about why they'd been stopped. The deputy then requested Brian Kohlberger's driver's license. Other vehicles roared by. As Brian searched for his license, the deputy told him, "You was right up on that van, man. I pulled you over for tailgating." Kohlberger nodded, looking calm. He handed his driver's license across his father's torso. "Where are you heading?" the deputy asked. "We're going to get some Thai food," Brian told him. "Well, we're coming from WSU," his father corrected. "What's WSU?" Apparently trying to be agreeable, Michael added more information than necessary. He explained that his son was a student at Washington State University and that, in fact, Brian had received a text alert about a SWAT standoff near campus that day. The small talk only made things confusing for the deputy. "So are you coming from Washington State University and you're going where?" Eventually, they described their circumstances with more clarity. "We're slightly punchy because we've been driving for hours," Michael explained. "Do me a favor," the deputy eventually said to Brian. "Don't follow too close, okay?" He let them go with a warning. The feds reportedly monitored Kohlberger's Elantra pulling back onto the interstate. Less than 10 minutes later, Brian Kohlberger was again stopped by the police, again pulling his vehicle to the far right shoulder. The traffic was heavy with big 18-wheelers roaring by. This time it was an Indiana state trooper who approached the passenger side of Kohlberger's Elantra. Michael again squinted up through his lenses. The trooper spoke across him, just like the last cop, explaining to Brian that he had been driving too closely behind a semi-trailer. "You only had one car length," the trooper said. Brian admitted that they'd just been stopped for a few miles back for the same reason. "You got stopped by a trooper?" Michael again explained no, it had been a sheriff deputy, and he told the story of the SWAT standoff that day at WSU. The story didn't seem to track with the trooper. "Well, I'm not going to give you guys another ticket or warning," he interjected. He leaned his forearms on the open window ledge and peered into the car. Eventually, he added, "Where are y'all heading to?" They told him Pennsylvania. "PA, that's a long haul." "You guys scared of airplanes?" In the blue sky above, thick cumulus clouds were moving closer. Kohlberger pulled his Elantra, filthy from travel, back onto the interstate. The entire trip, there had been a police bolo for a white Hyundai Elantra, possibly associated with the murders in Moscow, and additional public requests for information about the car. It is not publicly known why that bolo was issued when they already had Kohlberger as their primary suspect. A law enforcement officer who did not wish to be named suggested the bolo may have been for appearances only so that Kohlberger would falsely believe the police were still lost in the weeds of their investigation. Luckily, neither the Hancock County Sheriff's deputy nor the Indiana State Trooper had known about the bolo, or they might have prematurely begun to question Kohlberger about his vehicle. If he'd gotten edgy, then what then? The feds had reportedly been tracking Kohlberger from a distance on purpose, allowing the task force time to build a proper case, but any skittishness by their suspect could have been a catastrophic. There might have been violence on the road, and Kohlberger could have escorted. Until now, he seemed to have no idea that he'd been watched, and Chief Fry wanted to keep it this way. Kohlberger and his father arrived at the family home in Albrightsville on December 16th, and the FBI contacted the Pennsylvania State Police to assist with surveillance of the Kohlberger residence. It was a modest home in the wooded, gated neighborhood, and like each of the homes in the neighborhood, it sat on a relatively large parcel. The Kohlberger house had 3 bedrooms on an acre of land. Kohlberger's behavior during his initial days in Pennsylvania was monitored closely. He was observed taking his vehicle to a local mechanic for servicing and was spotted in his driveway wearing surgical-style gloves while meticulously suctioning the Hyundai's upholstery and trunk with a shop vacuum. Oddly and quite suspiciously, in the eyes of the surveillance team, Kohlberger was also observed at 4 a.m. taking trash bags from his family's residence and walking them down the long driveway to deposit them in the next door neighbor's trash bins, not in the bins belonging to his own family. And I said he has OCD. He didn't want his bins to be dirty. Later, under the cover of darkness, the surveillance team grabbed the Kohlberger family trash before any more of it could disappear and shipped it back to Idaho. Forensic experts at the state crime lab outside of Boise put on their own rubber gloves and went to work. This is the last chapter of this part. So Chief Fry and his team had gotten their biggest break yet. The garbage bag snatched from the Kohlberger family included a DNA sample from Michael Kohlberger. According to the crime lab, this sample was a parental match to the touch DNA found on the knife sheath that was left behind at the murder scene next to Maddie Mogen's body. Whoever had opened that snap on the sheath was the son of Michael Kohlberger, and the man only had one son, Brian Kohlberger. A student living just over 10 minutes from the victims appeared to be the killer the world had been looking for. They had not found an exact match to Brian Kohlberger's DNA in the trash bins, and that was unusual but not probative of a warrant. Kohlberger's exact DNA profile was a bridge that investigators could cross later, and they would. For now, lead investigator Brett Payne submitted a probable cause affidavit for an arrest. Warrants were immediately approved for Brian Kohlberger to be taken into police custody in Pennsylvania and for search and seizure of property at the modest family home in Albrightsville, including the white Hyundai Elantra sedan. What the police had hoped to find were blood or fiber samples on clothing, the murder weapon itself, incriminating documents, stored data on Kohlberger's electronics, computer devices, or cell phones, or any other evidence of the crimes, even property belonging to Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, or Ethan, such as their clothing or identification cards, or other trophies Kohlberger might have taken from the scene. Search and seizure warrants were also issued for Kohlberger's apartment unit in Pullman, Washington, and for the office he occupied as a student teacher in the Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology on WSU's campus. But those would wait until after his arrest. Getting to Kohlberger before he could flee was top priority. For now, the authorities in Pennsylvania devised a strategy for taking Kohlberger into custody. They would have to approach late night. That was certain. It would be safest for everybody, including Brian Kohlberger's parents, and they would have to keep a tight lid on the pending arrest. With the large number of cops now working the case across multiple states, and with the intense media scrutiny and volume of reporters chasing down stories, it was always possible that a rogue associate of law enforcement officer could surreptitiously leak information for personal gain or simply to chatty at the local watering hole. If Kohlberger got tipped off before the police department's extraction operation, they could be looking at a bloodbath when they went to grab him. Long after midnight on December 30th, nearly 50 tactical assets from the Pennsylvania State Police crept through the Kohlberger family neighborhood under cover of darkness. They were serving a high-risk warrant on an alleged quadruple homicide perpetrator, and they weren't taking any chances with the number of assets working his extraction. It was better to be overmanned than under. Then beneath a 3/4 moon, the tactical team did what it does best. They cracked the hinges off the Kohlberger's home's doors, broke out windows, and stormed the residence. According to reports, Brian Kohlberger was found wide awake, standing in the parents' kitchen. He was wearing latex gloves, shorts, and a t-shirt while stuffing his personal trash in his Ziploc baggies for later disposal. That was odd to say the least, but appeared to explain why the surveillance team hadn't found his exact DNA profile in the family bins. Kohlberger had either been hiding his trash and consequently his DNA from the authorities, sensing they were gaining on him, or his peculiar behavior was related to a possible obsessive-compulsive disorder that would later be alluded to online. That's not what that is, buddy. coming from someone with chronic OCD. Kohlberger's parents appeared shocked at his arrest and at the subsequent search of their household while they watched their boy being put into handcuffs and taken from the residence. Investigators confiscated, among other things, several handguns, knives, black clothing, black gloves, black face masks, size 13 athletic shoes, medical-style gloves, computer and cell equipment, and the family shock vacuum that Kohlberger had used to clean his car. From the Hyundai, investigators seized a shovel, gloves, hiking boots, goggles, and seat cushions of the vehicle, a door panel and headrest, and the gas and brake assemblies. Brian Kohlberger was shuttled to the Monroe County Correctional Facility, where he changed into a jail-issued jumpsuit and was discreetly booked. He was held without bail or without bond until he could be returned to Idaho. While the search of his on-campus office later that afternoon reportedly turned up nothing substantive, investigators raiding his apartment in Pullman found and confiscated a black examination-style glove designed to be resistant to chemicals and puncturing. Police also took the dust container from Kohlberger's vacuum cleaner, several hair strands, a possible animal hair strand, a computer tower, stained mattress covers, and cuttings from an uncased pillow that showed reddish-brown stains. That day, Chief Fry held an impromptu press conference from Idaho addressing Kohlberger's capture. He stood aside an American flag in a wood-paneled room among members of this task force. The media was caught by surprise, and many filmed him with their cell phones. Last night, he started at the podium. In conjunction with the Pennsylvania State Police, the Federal Bureau of Investigation detectives arrested 28-year-old Brian Christopher Kohlberger in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. Fry choked up before continuing. On a warrant for the murders of Ethan, Xana, Madison, and Kaylee. He took another breath, steadying himself. Being in the limelight was still not his forte. These murders have shaken our community, Fry said solemnly, and no arrest will ever bring back these young students. Then, blinking back tears, he spoke more emotionally than most police chiefs. Over the past 6 weeks, I have been continually reminded of how much our community cares. Locally, public support has been exceptional with kind words, food for investigators, and letters of support. You will never know how much your words of encouragement helped us through these trying times. I appreciate, he took another breath, appreciate each of you and each of your kindness. When it came time to answer questions, Fry took a couple dozen. One reporter asked, your department and other investigators on the case took a lot of flack for keeping information close to your chest. Are you glad you did that? Fry smiled knowingly. I will 100% stand behind the way that we handled this investigation. But there were holes in this case that nobody except perhaps Kohlberger's lawyers had thought about. The PhD student in criminology was preparing to fight. And we are on part 8. Just like that. And thank you guys for hitting the like button. I appreciate that. So yeah, if you missed the first half of the live, don't forget to go back and check it out. I'm trying to think. I'm gonna see if they've updated their Facebook yet. So Judge Hippler, if you'd like to go back and learn the reasons why he denied it and everything, you can always go back if you're just now joining us. But he did deny both the continuance and the alternate perpetrator theory. He said, they're both dumb. I don't know. That's not what he said. But, he said that pretty much. So we are going to court. He is giving her an extra week. I don't know if he's necessarily given it to Anne, but they are going to have the trial on the 18th of August instead of on the 11th. So there's that. Also, I don't really know what else we went over in the beginning of the life. We went over some other stuff too. I don't know. Yeah, you also have to rewind. I can't remember. But that's all I got for you for tonight. I really appreciate it. We've been on here for 2.5 hours almost. That was a lot of reading. But thanks for being here tonight. I do appreciate you guys. I'll be back on. I think I'm going to come on and do afternoon live tomorrow over a different case. I don't know which case I'm going to cover yet. There's a couple different ones that have updates, or I might just do like an update case, like case updates or something. But if you guys are able to attend, we'd love to have you. But I will see you guys all tomorrow evening. If you guys aren't here for the live during the day, I'll meet you back here at 9:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So hopefully you guys will have a great Friday. It's the end of the week. And if you're watching on replay, make sure you hashtag replay in the comments below. And I will see you guys all tomorrow. And I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Bye, guys.
Just like the street lights lit this town, like a fire in a blaze, gotta burn it down. Can't be afraid to leave this out. We got this far, don't know how.